first is kind of an awareness, saying, okay, what am I eating? And I will say that most people don't believe that chemicals or dyes really do have an impact. Growing up on Mountain Dew, honey buns, Cheetos, cheese balls, Totino's pizzas, I was sick a lot. I still went to school, but I remember being sick a lot. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. If a person's been in those stages for a very long time, the muscles often get into a contracted state because it's in a ready state to act to get the person out of the danger or the stressor. And so when that happens, the body starts to change how it moves.
Happy birthday to you. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the No Have Cakes podcast. My name is Jim Sabelico, and I'm honored that you are here with me today. Today with me, I have a very special guest, someone who I'm looking forward to talking to for a multitude of reasons. One of them is just the variety of topics of interest our guest has, from all over the place, from exercise to running to physical health to spiritual health to just overall success and excellence. And I feel like that's a great fit for what we're trying to do here and having these conversations to help you level up in all those areas of your life, not just be the best, most successful business person, but also be your best physical shape, be your best spiritual shape, be your best self in all areas. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our special guest, Dr. Amy Novotny. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Jim. That was a very nice introduction, and I'm excited to be here. I love the premise of your podcast and just how you are helping people, and would love to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Nana, I really appreciate that. And especially I'm really interested in kind of the work that you do. Now, I understand you started an institute. Now it's the PABR Institute. I have that correct?
Yep, that's correct. I say PABR or PABR, either way. Yep.
So tell me, what does it actually stand for? And then kind of what's going on there?
Sure. So it stands for pain, awareness, breathing, relief. So the focus is helping people calm down the fight or flight nervous system that often creates a lot of body pain, stress, anxiety, insomnia, and even can lead to various orthopedic surgeries like joint replacements and back surgeries, neck surgeries, and much more. So there's a nervous system in our body that we often associate with stress, but it causes a physiological change in how our muscles work that can lead to various pains in the body or just even insomnia. Basically affects every organ system. So I help people all over the world learn how to control that response and to change the response so they can alleviate chronic pain or stress, anxiety, and insomnia, those types of things.
Right. And I love that you do that, because I think it is a very real thing that kind of what's going on in your head or even subconsciously is affecting how you show up in the world. And the aches and pains that you have are solvable not just by medication or surgery, but by also fixing from within. So I'm curious, like when someone comes to you, how do you start to figure out, is it fight or flight, or are they stuck in freeze? Like, what is the beginning process for someone who's not feeling well, but just wanting to kind of figure out, like, where do I start?
Right. So we do have a conversation first and ask a little bit about their history, like just general medical history, but also how do you handle stress? How are your relationships? What's your relationship with food? How are you sleeping? I need to look at the various aspects of daily life where the nervous system can have a big impact. Then I also look at how they're moving. I say, hey, Jim, let me just see you walk. Let me see you reach. Let me see you bend over. And the reason I'm doing that is because I can see how the physical body has changed based on being in a fight or flight or freeze. And there's another term, fawn, which is people-pleasing mode. So those 4 F's, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. If a person's been in those stages for a very long time, the muscles often get into a contracted state because it's in a ready state to act to get the person out of the danger or the stressor. And so when that happens, the body starts to change how it moves. And so I watch for that. I watch to see if they are very back dominant, and if they've lost the kind of flexibility or mobility that we usually associate with children. Have they lost that as an adult? Because you don't necessarily need to lose that as an adult. We think of it as just aging, but it's really the additive stressors that have occurred over life. So we look at that, we look at all the aspects of their life and say, okay, we need to address all these things. There are things that I can just advise, like, hey, we want you to get more sleep, or let's change your diet, how you're eating. Nothing so super restrictive, but let's change some things about that. But then we dive into, okay, Jim, your left shoulder sitting higher on your body. We need to get your rib cage down so that the shoulder can drop down so you can feel it release. But we're going to change your breathing mechanics at the same time. So it's not breath work, but the actual mechanics of how you breathe. So you can feel the nervous system calm down and you can feel your body release. So it's kind of like that sensation you have after you have a massage, not the ones that hurt you, but
Right.
a good massage where you feel really relaxed and you're like, wow, I feel loose and bobblehead type. I want you to be able to get that without anyone touching you. That's the whole point, that you feel that loose and release. And then we stabilize you so you don't go back into the tight mode that typically happens the next day after massage.
And I feel like it's interesting you brought that point up, because I think most people think that feeling of post massage, right, when you feel loose and you feel relaxed and you feel free, is like not achievable to be normal, right? But I think it's fair to say that once you've kind of aligned everything and done the work, you can basically live sort of in that zone. Is that fair?
Yep, absolutely. And that's, I experienced that and I help other people and they are experiencing it. And the thing is, once you feel it and you know how to do it, you don't need a massage therapist. You don't need anyone else. You just do it to yourself every single day and you're happy-go-lucky and feeling great.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great reward for people to understand, like, hey, this is possible to be able to live and feel great. Like, not just once every 6 months when you go spend the money and get a massage, but like you could wake up every day and feel that way. So I think the work that you're doing is awesome to just open people's eyes to that possibility.
Yeah.
It does make me wonder, how do you initially approach the conversation? Because I know for a lot of people I speak with, they're not even aware that they're living in freeze or fawn. They're just so far stuck in what they think is normal that I have to imagine, even before you can get into the breath work or whatever it is, getting them to understand, hey, this is not normal for you. Like, how do you approach that conversation?
Right. That's a great question. So people will typically come to me and say, I have pain, no one can help me, or I have anxiety, no one can help me, or I've tried all of these different things and no one's been able to help me and I can't sleep. That's usually how the conversation starts. And then I start educating them about this autonomic nervous system in their body and the fight or flight aspect of that nervous system. And I'll start demonstrating on my body and say, okay, if I'm holding myself like this, my chest is out, I'm sucking up my gut, my back is straight as a board, right there, I am physically in a fight or flight position that is going to cause my nervous system to be on guard, and it's going to put me mentally and emotionally on edge just by doing that. So if we look at the physical body, and if it's in a fight or flight state, and I demonstrate that on me, most people are like, oh, wait, yeah, oh, I feel that. Oh, I can feel my ribs are flared up and out. I can feel my back is just on tension. And so they start to realize that. And I say, okay, just let your gut go. Just let your belly hang out. And some people, once they let their gut come out, they feel their rib cage drop and they feel this wave of relaxation, just like that. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was holding myself in a guarded place. So that works for some people. Other people I'll describe, are you emotionally reactive? If a glass of water spills over, do you get upset about that? And some people will say, yeah, I get so angry. If my kid knocks it over, of course, I'm going to get mad and yell at them or say something. And some will just even admit, yeah, I'm just so reactive with my husband. And I yell at him over the littlest thing. And so then I'll bring in, okay, that's a sign that you're in a fight or flight, freeze, fawn mode. And the emotional reactivity is a sign that your body doesn't feel safe. So in our conversations, and as they're just talking to me about who they are, I usually can point out in a non-judgmental way that their nervous system is on guard, and we can do something to change that.
Right. And I'm going to go on a limb here, but
Yeah.
guess that once you're able to show them a little bit of proof of concept, right, where you're able to give them that quick win, they buy in a little bit more to understand, hey, maybe what I'm living isn't normal and there is a better way to do it. Does that often happen that way?
It does. And I will say, because what I do is not very clear. It's not like I'm going to the store and buying an apple and saying, hey, go buy an apple. I'm selling you an apple. What I'm doing is very esoteric, and there's steps and a process to it. So having them experience even something very simple, like I just described, does help.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point there. It's because the first time I really even heard this in any sort of detail was, once I kind of discovered you in your profile, was really understanding about the work that you do. But upon reading it, it made so much sense because I believe in the science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't something that most people, I think, even are aware exists. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, was just to really bring it out there and to normalize it for people to understand, hey, maybe there's a better way other than taking another medication, which is going to give me 6 more side effects I'm going to have to combat, or going to do these 17 different things, which are just going to push me further down the hole, right? They're treating the symptoms rather than like the root of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And that's one of my goals of being on a show like yours is, if nothing else, at least can I give enough information that someone thinks about something differently,
right?
So that maybe they'll catch themselves where they're holding their breath, sucking their gut up in, and they feel the tension and they say, oh, wait, I remember this lady talking about that and saying, let your gut go, let your belly button hang out, and let me try that. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, I just breathed differently. And I just felt myself relax a little bit. And maybe this issue I'm facing isn't that big of a deal. Of course, it may be important, but it's not important enough to be reactive.
Right.
More active instead of reactive. Take action on something. So I appreciate that you're interested in this. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So for someone who might be experiencing some level of symptom, like what do the symptoms even look like for someone who might be in fight or flight and feeling these things? Like I think, let me take a step back. Yeah. What I want to do is really open someone's eyes to, oh man, I didn't even realize that was possible as the cause, right? So I understand that there's different issues with muscles or fatigue, or like, what are the other symptoms that someone might have that they can actually understand this might be the root?
Sure. So sleep, let's go through that. So sleeping, having trouble falling asleep, having a racing mind, that's a big one. Racing mind. Someone who wakes up in the middle of the night and kind of gasps or has a nightmare and wakes up with a jolt. People who don't go to sleep before midnight. Before midnight, if you have a sleep cycle before midnight, you're more predominant in deep sleep, which is when you shift over from fight or flight sympathetic into parasympathetic. So anyone who doesn't go to bed until 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, your body's going to be in a heightened state. If you look at diet, so if indigestion or other digestive issues, the gut is very connected to this autonomic nervous system. And so when the gut is disrupted, you have indigestion, bloating, that there is a component where you're in fight or flight mode. Anxiety can sometimes mask itself as well with the gut too. So that would also indicate you're in fight or flight mode. We touched on emotional reactivity. That's a big one. Blowing up over the littlest things and feeling short-tempered, having trouble pausing and collecting yourself on what you're going to say. Instead, you just blurt stuff out. So those are signs that your body is heightened up. Chronic pain, we kind of in the physical realm, but chronic pain is also another sign, as well as can be people who are arthritic and bone on bone. That's a sign that the muscles have tightened up in response to stress. Often it can be just emotional stress, and they've pulled the joints out of position, and so you've had wear and tear on the joints in result to some stress. So let me explain that one a little bit more. So let's say you've done physical labor a lot of your life. Maybe you're lifting boxes or you're on the floor, scrubbing floors, something like that. Those are physical stressors and maybe even financial or mental stressors where your body tightens up to help you do that. So you don't lose your job or you do a good job. Those stressors cause the muscles to behave inappropriately. And over time, it wears and tears at your joint. And so you can learn how to get the muscles to release their abnormal hold so you don't have to have the joint replacement, even if you're bone on bone. Cardiac, pulmonary, shortness of breath is a sign. Feeling like you can't breathe or you can't get enough air in. That's a big sign you're in fight or flight mode as well. Those are some of the bigger ones. I'm sure I could go through even more, but just to give you an idea.
Yeah, and that list seems to be really long. Like there's a lot of things that I think most people don't really associate with that. One of the ones I find most interesting is gut. I often say like people will be very quick to tell their kid, hey, don't have any more candy because when you eat too much sugar, you go crazy. Or don't drink red Gatorade because the food dye makes you react in a certain way. We don't tend to do that once we become adults. We somehow think magically we don't have these same reactions anymore. But to me, it's so freaking clear, especially when I look at my own kids, like I can understand you are behaving in this way because of these reasons why. It made me think, hey, let's start looking at what is it I'm doing and is it causing the same type of reaction? So I'm curious, like, sure, for anybody, like where do you start with understanding the role that your gut plays and the role that the food you consume, whether it's preservatives, whether it's, you're trying to eat holistically, like what does that look like in terms of someone's symptoms coming out?
Yeah, that one's a hard one because a person's diet is very connected to their immediate culture of the household, bigger culture of ethnicity, but also it has a very emotional tie. And sometimes when people are in fight or flight mode, telling them you can't eat something is a very big trigger to some kind of past abuse or some kind of past situation. So what you were mentioning about recognizing first is kind of an awareness, saying, okay, what am I eating? And I will say that most people don't believe that chemicals or dyes really do have an impact. They think, oh, it's so minuscule. My body should be able to handle it. I'm exposed to other things out in the air and the environment. So why does it matter that I change my food? Well, the food has a more intimate relationship with your body and it has a direct impact in a greater way. So I'll tell people, okay, let's look at what are all the insults to your body that you're eating. Is it processed food? Is it sugar? Is it caffeine? Is it some kind of chemicals? What can we change that we can substitute that still doesn't affect your culture or your emotions? We have to look at that. Because if I say, hey, Jim, I only want you to eat organic fruits and vegetables, and if you eat fish or chicken or whatever, if I say only do that, you might rebel and say, I'm not going to do any of it. Or you might try it for a few days, maybe a week or so, and then come off of it. So if you look at your personality, are you an all or nothing person, or are you better with easing out of it? Is your nervous system less resistant that way? And so we have to look at that. But really, you want to look at what chemicals are in your food. How much caffeine are you intaking? Caffeine can directly affect something called your, it affects how your heart rate variability, it's called heart rate variability. I couldn't think of the word, heart rate variability. So which is an indication if you are calm or ramped up. And so we want to get our heart rate variability as high as possible because it indicates that we're in a calm state. So it's a matter of, can you shift your eating so that you're creating less insult to your body? Because yes, we're going to be affected by air pollution. We're going to be affected by whatever's on the walls of our house. It seems very minuscule, but it does make a difference. And I know that from personal experience because I used to eat horribly. I was the worst of the offenders growing up on all processed food, sugar, candy, honey buns, you name it. And I switched over, and my health has changed dramatically. And now I'm an example for my 16-month-old boy who eats only healthy food. And
Right.
some people may see that as very restrictive. But guess what? Last night, he just ate a ton of roasted broccoli and loved it, and was panicking when I put the lid on the container to put it away. So you got to pick your battles and decide what's important.
Yeah. And I think that's an important part of establishing normal for people. Like, you have the opportunity now for your child to establish what normal is. And if they grow up on a diet of healthy, whole foods, not just, hey, whatever's convenient, let me just throw some cereal at you and hope for the best. Like, that becomes normal for them, where they have that much of a head start later in life. So, I feel like a lot of us at this point are starting to kind of have to break out of those routines, because at least for me, when I was raised, they didn't have this level of awareness to it. So, it was, hey, here's whatever's convenient, go eat that, because it's just quick and easy. And yeah, there's some food in there somewhere. So I think, having these conversations is really going to help us continue to develop and grow. I am curious, how did you get started into this? Because this feels like there's probably some level of backstory in there for, like, what was the inspiration to get in this field?
Yeah, so growing up on Mountain Dew, honey buns, Cheetos, cheese balls, Totino's pizzas, I was sick a lot. I still went to school, but I remember being sick a lot, especially going into high school and everything. And so when I started my doctorate in physical therapy, they started introducing us a little bit about nutrition. And it made me pause when I became a physical therapist for a while, and I worked with these elderly people, and they all looked at me and said, the one thing I regret is not taking care of my health, not eating well, not sleeping, and not exercising. And it was a consistent message, consistent enough that I said, okay, I'm used to being active. I'm used to doing whatever. Yeah, I get sick, but that's what started me. And I started simply at first. I cut out processed foods first. And then I cut out sweets, that chocolate, and that was hard. That was probably the hardest thing, was cutting out chocolate. And for a month, I was very depressed. But I remember one day waking up at 4 a.m. thinking, wow, I have energy. And I got up, I went to the gym, I swam, I rode the bike, I went to work. I got off work and I was like, I still have energy. What is wrong with me? And I went out and ran 5 miles. And then I went home and I cleaned. It's like, what is wrong with me? Seriously, what is wrong with me? Why in the world do I have all this energy? And so that was the realization is, wow, I really cleaned myself out. I kicked these habits where I was dependent on the next chemical to get me through the day. And so I haven't had caffeine for 18 years.
Wow.
It's been a long time, but I used to have 6 Mountain Dews a day. I was so addicted to it. And once I got rid of it, it's like, I never want to go back. And I've had people poke at me. I've had people try to get me to do stuff. And I say, I just feel good what I'm doing. I don't mind if you do it. You eat however you want, but I'm going to continue doing this. And I'm steadfast in it because I feel so much better. I really do. Yeah.
Hey, it's almost hard to look at other people making those decisions, though, when you understand, like, having been in that spot, there's often this urge to want to just grab them by the shoulders and shake them and say, hey, don't you realize what you're doing? You could be, doing this so much differently. But I just, again, want to give you the honor for doing it how you are doing it and showing up as an example of what's possible. I think that there's a lot of people who do almost more harm than good, right? Because they have the information, they have the knowledge, but it's the delivery of that. So, your ability to kind of tactfully do that, where you're really just looking to help people and show up the right way, I think is really important.
Yes, and that's a very important point. I never want to come off as superior or judgmental. but it is hard. I know depression is very linked to what's in the gut microbiome, the flora and fauna that live in your gut. It's very linked. And I have some very, very dear people in my life who suffer from depression and who take medications for it. And they're okay with taking the medication. And they say, I feel normal when I'm on the medication. And then I see what they're eating and I bite my tongue. I don't say anything. And I just love on them. And if they want to ask me and they see how I eat, but if they want to ask me and want change, then I'm all there and ready to help them. But I don't say anything until they open the conversation to it, because I never want them to feel bad being around me, because that will make their symptoms even worse. So it is a very thin line I walk on, but at the same time, I do want people to feel good. I really do.
Yeah, and I think showing up as that example of what's possible is the right way to do it. Or would they understand, hey, there's something different about her. Like, she shows up a little bit differently. And when they get to that point, they kind of make that correlation then, and then they go seeking wisdom. But I agree, it's a struggle to not want to force that information on people, because genuinely you still want to help them. You want to serve them. You want them to be their best self. And it's a challenge, but I think you are doing it correctly there. So kudos to you.
Thanks. I'll say one thing with that. So my little boy that's 16 months, he's on the growth charts. He's in the 99th percentile, and he has been since he was like a week or two old. And a lot of people will ask me about that, like, wow, he looks so healthy. Like, what are you feeding him? And that I sometimes use as a segue into, I feed him only organic fruits and vegetables and some grains. And I say, that's what I feed him. And he's huge, not in a bad way, but he's just grown so well. Granted, there could be genetics in there, but sometimes I use that and just say, he has tons of energy. He's doing well. He's developing well. That's something just to consider. So
yeah, and I think it's a lot easier to almost see that in a child when they don't have years of burdens laid on top of them. They don't have all this other stuff piled on, where you can really say, hey, I know definitively for the past 16 months, this is what this child has consumed, right? And you can tell kind of once you start adding in, external stimuli, the difference, right? And see very quickly, because you have a clean slate to work against. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep your eyes open to that stuff. It's a good point. I'd love to ask for you, because I know you're a busy person with work and family life and your personal life and all the things that you do. What does success look like for you? Like, what's your definition of living a successful life?
I think for me is, can I meet my basic needs, but then do I feel so comfortable in myself that I'm not constantly worrying about what other people think of me, and I'm not constantly trying to meet someone's expectations. So for me, success is more of a personal feel. I know there's this hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy, and you're trying to get to attain certain type of attainment and self-awareness and much more. But I really think success is, do I feel good about my life where I'm thriving, I'm growing, I'm learning, but I'm not worrying about other people. And that doesn't mean I'm going out and just behaving however I want, but I'm behaving in a respectful way, but I'm not worried. Is someone worried about me because, my hair is not thick enough, or I look a certain way? I just exist. I just exist and participate in the world. To me, that's success, and I've had to work hard to get there.
Well, you'd say that journey was worth it for you?
Absolutely, 100%.
Now, how much of that do you think is related to your own understanding of yourself, like your self-identity and your self-confidence and knowing who you are in the purest form?
I think it's partly that, and I think it's partly I discovered what my priorities were. I discovered several years ago what was really important to me, and that I still put at the top of my list every single day. And as long as I keep that in mind, other things fall into place. And I still have bad days and good days, just like anyone. But overall, I figured out what was really important to me that made me excited and made me have gratitude every day. And he's walking around with my friend watching him right now. And I'm able to do what I love with humans and adults for my business. But I also have gratitude that what I do with people has helped me have him.
I think it's sort of a beautiful point there, and that the more work you continue to do, the more you continue to stand up and have these conversations, and the more people you help, it really multiplies that effect. Whereas, now your kid can grow up in a world that doesn't have as many people walking around who are hurting, who are not feeling their best selves. And, I sort of think that's our obligation once we start to understand our own journey and feel our own best self, where we feel truly successful, not just in terms of like bank account and house, but like real true success and joy and fulfillment and freedom, where we can go out and then start to be those examples for people to then change the narrative, where there are other people out there who are starting to feel normal, the right kind of normal, not normal as in 6 Mountain Dews a day, I need this to survive. Normal as in, hey, I wake up every day feeling great. That's just great. So I love that.
Yeah.
What would you say is an actionable piece of advice someone can implement in their life today to have a slightly better day, whether that's breathing practice or whether it's some other life advice? Like for you, what would that be?
Sure. I'll give a little breathing practice just because that moves the needle for quite a bit of people I work with. If you're sitting in your chair, sit all the way back, let yourself relax into the back of the chair. Then have your feet flat on the ground, knees at the level of your hips or higher, hip crease or higher. A lot of times the chair is too tall, but once you get your knees up a little bit higher, put some books under your feet or lower the chair, then let your belly sit out. As you exhale, let your belly spill out. Don't suck it in. So if you blow out and your chest drops in and your belly spills out, you feel this wave of relaxation. For some people, that'll be really hard to do because they're used to doing that the opposite. But if you can implement that and let the belly spill out and you blow out, that can start to shift you and help you feel calm. So I would say check on that a couple times an hour. Most people don't realize that they hold their breath, especially if they're doing something that their mind is engaged in. They don't even realize that they're holding their breath. So become aware of that. Make sure you're breathing on a regular basis. And then exhale, let your belly spill out. Start to feel that sensation of relaxation, and your brain will start to want that more and more and start to seek, how do I get that again? How do I feel that again? And just little tiny practices throughout the day starts to change your nervous system.
That's a great one. I think that is an odd association most people don't have. But that's a good one. I'll certainly implement that and see how it goes. So thank you for that. I'd love to ask one more question if I could. Definitely a curveball to our current conversation, but for you, and again, the answer might be a little tough here because given our conversation about the gut and health, but I ask this of every guest, and I think that there's always a fun answer. What is your favorite flavor of cake?
I would say probably chocolate because I have this conversation with good friends where I say, what is your death meal? It's a great conversation. So basically, what is your last meal you want to have before you die? So for me, it's a chocolate molten cake. Whereas chocolate, and then it has like this chocolate sauce in the middle, and that's it. So because I used to like chocolate. I haven't had that in 20 years, so I don't know if I still like it, but it still sounds good in my mind. There you go.
I like that answer. That's good. I think it's interesting to always ask that question because the answer is always different. Some people will say chocolate, whatever, but it's more so the logic behind kind of how we make these associations. And I always find a lot of people have some level of emotional attachment to, this carrot cake that their grandma used to make, or whatever it is. And I always find the emotional attachment to that so fascinating with how these core memories get developed, and sort of like we said, what becomes normal for people, right? Because they grew up on this sort of thing. They associate the feeling of joy with grandma's apple pie. And, just pursuant to our conversation on gut health and how all these things kind of relate, I find it all so interesting how we create this normal in our life and what those decisions really come from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. Food as emotion that's tied together and brings back memories, like you said. So it's a good question. You get to know someone a little bit more with it.
Yeah. I think it's even more interesting when you start to realize that there are new ways to associate the foods you eat with new emotions of joy and peace and freedom.
Yeah.
Right. Which sounds crazy to a lot of people, but do you think it's fair to say people can create these new emotions based on eating clean, whole foods instead?
Absolutely. Back to the broccoli example, it took me a couple years, but then I started craving broccoli. So now in the evening, I'm like, oh, I have roasted broccoli. So I'm just like my little boy. I'm like, I really want some. And you can change it. And I say that coming from eating purely sugar and processed foods for 20 some years. You can change. No matter what, you can change.
That's awesome. Any way that we can best support you, people can follow you from here? Like, what would be our next best step?
You can go to my website. It's PABRinstitute.com. So PABRinstitute.com. There's resources on there, a lot of free resources. You can follow me on social media, just Dr. Amy Novotny. Any way I can help, I am always there. I do free consultations if people just need more information and want some guidance. I do that as well. So I am here for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will definitely give you my highest endorsement for this. For anyone who's interested in trying to figure out, hey, is this a thing that I need? You do. I can't emphasize enough how many of us are stuck in these zones of freeze or fawn, or just stuck living this life that we think is normal, and we don't understand all the side effects, which are really just like this negative cycle making it worse for us, where we start to feel worse, and then we have this negative mentality. So when we can address the root of it, and I think you spoke to that a lot, we can solve that and start to live this more joyous, more successful life. So for anyone who's feeling that way, I absolutely recommend that you start having that investigation for yourself.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate your being here and everything you've shared. This has been a lot for me. So thank you again. I appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.